those that have passed and pay our respects to the victims senselessly lost by these crimes. Once again, welcome to the 13 days of Halloween, and let's jump into the video. Hello everybody, and welcome to the third video of the 13 days of Halloween. I hope you are enjoying it so far, and I am very much looking forward to continuing on with these videos. Today we will be talking about a small town Halloween murder that changed everything for this East Coast town in the United States. So let us jump into it. On October 27th of 1992 is when the small town in Oil City, Pennsylvania would change forever. No longer was this town safe from crimes seen in other cities around the country. As media outlets and news sources descended on this town, it was clear that nothing would ever be the same again. It was around 8 o'clock at night when Shauna Melinda Howe, at the age of 11 years old, walked home from her Girl Scouts Halloween party. It was another average night in this town, meant to be just as safe as usual. This little girl went to a fun Halloween party with friends, and on her walk home, she had no idea the worst was coming. She had made it to the busy corner of Reed and West 1st Streets, which was only 2 blocks from her family home when she was kidnapped. Shauna lived with her mother, Lucy, and her stepfather, John. Shauna loved Halloween, and since it was just a few days before the 31st, she decided to make her own costume for this party. Now, as mentioned already, Shauna was part of the Girl Scouts, and they were having their annual Halloween party on the 27th. The party was about half a mile from Shauna's home, and her family was not able to pick her up that night. And although Shauna could have walked, she was afraid of the dark, and her parents did not want her walking home alone. Shauna's mother told her that she would set up a ride for her and not to worry about it. At around 8 p.m., Shauna's mother, Lucy, called home to check up on everyone, given that she herself was still at work. Everything was fine except for the fact that Shauna had not made it home yet. Well, it turns out that Lucy had forgotten to set up a ride for Shauna, and that is why she ended up walking home. And at that point, Lucy puts 2 and 2 together and assumes would drive to the home where the Girl Scouts Halloween party was hosted, and all around the surrounding area and down the streets that she could have walked to get home. But still, he could not find Shauna. That Girl Scout party would be the last time that Shauna was seen alive. This story of her murder is gruesome and displays what happens when authorities do not follow leads appropriately. Lucy would call Shauna's friend Joey, and she asked her if she knew where Shauna could be. Joey told Lucy that Shauna was at the party, and when she realized no one was there to pick her up, they both started walking home together. But somewhere along the way, they parted ways to get to their own homes. Shauna had shared with Joey that she was nervous and that she did not want to walk home alone. Shauna asked Joey to walk home with her, but instead Joey offered that the girls walk to her house, and then Joey's father could drive Shauna home, but for some reason Shauna refused and the girls parted ways. After hearing this from Joey, Lucy and John immediately called the police and report Shauna missing. The police would show up at their home, and one of them got a call telling them that earlier that evening there had been a call made about a child abduction from someone who saw it happening. At 8:06 p.m. that night, a man named Dan Payton was walking down the street when he saw a young girl walking alone. He also saw a man walking across the street in the opposite direction. And Dan said that this man crossed the street and began talking to the little girl, which in fact was Shauna. Dan described this man as tall, thin, and wearing a jacket. He witnessed the man pick up Shauna, and a few moments later, he heard a scream. Dan ran towards the scream to see what was going on and try to offer help, but by the time he got there, all he saw was a small red car driving away. With the police piecing together Lucy's call with Dan's call earlier that night about an abduction, authorities set roadblocks and alerted police within a 100-mile radius to see if they could locate this small red car. While the search for Shauna continued, authorities canceled Halloween in the small town. They saw it as another opportunity for another child to be abducted, and they did not want to take the risk. Shauna's uncle would create a huge search group, and on October 29th of 1992, 2 days after the disappearance, they found something. Someone in the search group found the bodysuit that Shauna had been wearing the night she went missing. Police searched extensively throughout this area, but nothing else was found. They would send the bodysuit to a lab for analysis, and there was evidence left behind on it from a sexual assault. Because of this, they now had a DNA sample of whoever had abducted Shauna, and tragically though, on October 30th, Shauna's case went from abduction to a homicide investigation. A man who had been camping in the woods noticed something in the water, and it turned out to be Shauna's body. She was wearing shorts, socks that did not belong to her, and a t-shirt inside out. The police had searched that exact area just one day prior, meaning that the killer had brought Shauna back and left her there to die. When a medical examiner conducted Shauna's autopsy, they found out how severely she had been abused. She had a shoe print on her face as if someone had stepped on her, and the cause of death was determined to be a fall, or the impact from a fall. They suspected that she had been pushed off a bridge and fell 33 feet to her death. Now, in abduction cases, the person who does the abduction is usually a family member, and so in Shauna's case, they took DNA samples from every male family member, including her brother, because they had that foreign DNA sample found on Shauna's bodysuit, and they wanted to compare the DNA, but none of the family's DNA was a match. The FBI then began to assist in the case, and they came up with a psychological profile for the killer. They said it was most likely a Caucasian male in his 20s, and they likely had a shift in behavior after the murder, such as drinking more and quick life changes, such as quitting a job. Police would call upon local residents of this town to think about any male they knew that had suddenly undergone intense change. The police would receive a ton of calls, and one of the people who called told them to investigate a man named Ted Walker because he fit the description. Ted Walker knew Shauna because he worked at a pizza shop that Shauna and her friends went to quite often, and he also drove a small red car. A lot of people who knew Ted in the community said that he would always try to give young girls hugs when they entered the pizza restaurant. He seemed to be the person who did this, but when they checked his DNA, it did not match the one that was found on Shauna in 1995. Another investigator was brought into the case, and after reviewing the records and files, he concluded that there had to be more than one person involved. This made sense to everybody because Shauna had been kept by her abductors for several days, and she had no visible marks on her body that would indicate being restrained. Immediately after police took this information into consideration, it did not take long for them to find new suspects. There were two people in particular who had been wreaking havoc during the entire investigation, and they were the O'Brien brothers by the name of Tim and James. They had grown up in this same town, and they both had criminal records involving sexual crimes against both adults and children. Now, although the brothers were criminals, their descriptions did not match the original suspect, and apparently they had been in jail near the time of the abduction and murder. And because of this, authorities did not take their DNA samples, and they were no longer treated as suspects. 8 years would go by, and the police were no closer to solving her murder, and the case began to run cold. In the early 2000s, Tim O'Brien was arrested once again for another crime, and during his interrogation, they asked him about Shauna. Since Shauna's case was very high profile, any man that was put into custody in town was asked about Shauna. An investigator asked Tim for a DNA sample since they hadn't all of those years before, and while he agreed to give his DNA, he seemed very nervous to do so. Tim's DNA would not be a match, but they decided to try his brother James's DNA. During this same time, which was 8 years after Shauna's murder, police would also find out that the brothers had not been in jail at all during the time of Shauna's abduction and murder. Though they had been in custody around that time, they had been released and did not have a true alibi for the time that she had been abducted and murdered. Once police obtained James's DNA and ran the analysis, it came back being a complete match. So, with this information, it was now obvious that, at a minimum, James was involved, and potentially Tim as well. And investigators could not get over the fact that neither of the brothers matched the original description of the man who abducted Shauna. And so they decide to do some more digging because although they have a DNA match, they know that somebody else had to be involved. They're not 100% sure if Tim was involved as well. And so after investigating more, police were led back to Ted Walker yet again, who was one potential suspects and the one that ran the pizza shop. Police would discover that at the time of the murder, the O'Brien brothers were living with Ted. When police originally went to Ted's home, he had told them that he did have a red car, but it did not work. And police never bothered to fact check this. When Ted was brought in for questioning in 2002, he told police that they did kidnap Shauna, but it was meant to be a joke. So what prompts somebody to think that kidnapping a child is funny? What was that thought process? Ted and the O'Brien brothers had casually one night been talking about the fact that the police in their town were a complete joke, and they came up with this plan to abduct someone just as a joke in front of a witness, then release them to prove that the police would still not be able to identify them. Ted's house was investigated by the police, and his face was all over the news. It was then when Dan Payton, the man who had originally called the police on the night of the abduction, called again and positively ID'd Ted as the man who abducted Shauna that night. Now, even though the police had a lot of information to go off of at this point, they were still struggling to build a solid case. They had proof that James had sexually assaulted Shauna, but there was nothing indicating that he had killed her. They were also struggling to tie Tim and Ted into this murder by evidence. During this time, Tim was convicted of 2 other crimes. It was a sexual assault against a 6-year-old girl and an 11-year-old boy. But finally, in 2004, James and Tim were finally charged with the abduction, sexual assault, and murder of Shauna. Soon after, Ted was also arrested, but only 2 days later, he took a deal that required him to testify against the brothers, and they would only try him for 3rd-degree murder in doing so. Though Ted testified as required, he changed his story, which he had done many times before. In 2006, the O'Brien brothers were convicted and sentenced to consecutive life sentences, and Ted was given 20 to 40 years in prison. After Shauna's murder in 1992, Oil City banned trick-or-treating and almost all Halloween-related activities. It wasn't until 2008 that the city allowed kids to trick-or-treat at night again. That concludes the case of Shauna Howe. The part of this that just baffles me the most is the fact that this group of men thought it would be funny to kidnap a kid and thought that there would be no repercussions to this, I guess. Like, nobody said that in the research, but in their mind was a joke or that the police would think it was a joke. I recognize that they didn't think that the police were good at doing their job, and it's clear that there were some major gaps in their investigation and follow-up, but there had to be some level of belief that the police might figure it out, even if it was a small possibility. And so I am just curious what the thought process was for them, if they thought they would just be able to talk their way out of it and not be held accountable, because again, it was just a joke, and clearly the plan was never for it to escalate to murder, at least according to Ted from an interview that I read, but nonetheless it did, and Shauna's precious life was taken. Let me know what you thought about this case and comment down below, please. Thank you for joining me on this case, and I will see you in our next 13 days of Halloween video.